Mr. Akins?
Present.
Mrs. Boynton?
Yes, here. Please stand for the allegiance. It's been one of those days. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. On our agenda is item number 2, which is our one plan goals. 2.01 is the acknowledgement of those goals. Please read them at your leisure. 3.01, minutes from our February 1st, 2024 Finance Committee. Could I have a motion to approve those minutes, please?
Motion to approve the minutes from February 1st, 2024 Finance Committee meeting.
Have a second. Second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Akins?
Yes.
Mrs. Boynton?
Yes. Motion passes 2-0. Item number 4 is new business, which is be a presentation on our district bond finances by Mrs. Armstrong.
That's on, all right.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
They're checking those
Like
mics.
you said, can't hear, but they're
on
outside.
mine.
Oh,
The feedback is that these aren't working. That might work.
So we just talk louder. All right, so for tonight's Finance Committee, the first thing is just quickly go over the objectives of the Finance Committee again. So the Finance Committee is one of the board standing committees, which allow board members who serve on that committee to become more knowledgeable in a given area and help the full board make decisions in a more confident and timely manner, and the review of our long-term financial plans and investments, and for providing advice to the board about the district's current and future financial positions, taking into account district's policies, practice, and culture to determine our needs. So for tonight's agenda, based on the feedback from board members and the community, we're going to review the bond financing team and have a presentation by Baker Tilly, and then also just look at what's next for our next Finance Committee meeting. So just for a quick overview, at a prior meeting, we talked about the financing team for the bond, which makes up myself, Squire Patton and Bogg as our bond counsel, Baker Tilly as our municipal advisor, and then Piper Sandler as our underwriters. So today here I have Marvin Fons from Baker Tilly to talk a little bit more about the bond anticipation note and the bond issue and answer any questions that you guys have. Yep, you can do it here.
Good evening, or still afternoon, I guess. So as we talked about the topics for tonight, wanted to cover sort of the way in which most school districts approach their debt issuance after a bond issue. And the question about timing of debt issuance and how much and when typically revolves around when the money is needed. School districts will issue the debt so that there is plenty of time ahead of the contracts that need to be awarded. In order to issue the debt, though, timely, the taxes need to be collected soon. So typically, in almost every case, when an issue passes during a calendar year, any calendar year, the very next calendar year, the new tax is collected. And typically at that full amount that was on the ballot, so that the school district can have ultimate flexibility in awarding contracts, getting to the stages as needed in the project. So debt issuance happens almost immediately following an election, and that happened in your case where a note issue, a short-term borrowing was done in December so that there were funds available to begin project work. The full amount not issued because the spending requirements didn't allow for that. The tax exempt debt needs to be spent within a certain amount of time. The general rule is spend 85% of what you borrow within 3 years. So as plans were put together, that was definitely a consideration, or is a consideration for Bedford. And so full amount collected means that, in taxes, means that any debt that's issued, whether it's a short-term note or the long-term bonds, can be paid down during the year in which debt is, or taxes are collected. So in your case, the note that was done in December will be coming due in July. It'll need to be renewed. That resolution's in front of the board tonight. But part of that activity can be the amount that's issued or borrowed again can be reduced because you've collected taxes, and some of that will be used to pay down the amount that's being borrowed and also pay interest on that note that's coming due. So the collections are being used to address and pay debt right away. So that's a typical approach as school districts enter into their projects. Eventually by year 2 or 3, the full amount of the authorizations are typically issued. In your case, it looks like by year 2, so by 2025, the full amount of $161 million should be issued in long-term bonds, and then the schedule will be locked in as far as principal and interest payments, known for sure what they will be at that time. And the amount being collected, 9.9 mils, will continue. The fourth bullet point here says tax rates collected typically decrease over time, and that's typically the case because the property values within the community increase, so the 9.9 mils is no longer needed. It could be collected at a lower rate in order to generate enough funds to pay the principal and interest each year. So eventually we would expect, same case for Bedford, that the 9.9 mils will be reduced over time. But for the first few years, we would expect the 9.9 to be needed. So in the last bullet point, debt issuance goals, I kind of alluded to a couple of them already. Issue the debt soon enough so that it's available to enter into contracts for the project, but not issue debt too early because it has to be spent within a certain amount of time. And then of course, another goal is to achieve as low interest rate, favorable borrowing cost as possible for the school district. And so overall, it's a timing of multiple issues potentially, as in your case, does happen for other school districts as well. So it's a pretty typical approach that's being followed here for Bedford. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a question. You say when the money is pulled to kind of have on hand for contracts, so they're ready to have contracts, what is the time frame for that? Is that like a 30-day window or 60 days?
And that's another good point in that typically it takes about a 90-day period of time. The short-term note borrowing can go faster, and that happened right after the election, where the issue was able to be accomplished before the end of December. So the short-term borrowing can be within 30 to 45 days, but the bond issue takes a little bit longer, so 90 days. So that's the other reason to make sure that money's in place well ahead of when those contracts are awarded, so they don't get caught behind on awarding the contracts.
So we know about how many contractors we will have to pay in that time before we make that referral. I guess that's what
Yeah,
I'm
so,
sorry.
so we do, we have a very good idea of, who we're gonna be paying and when. You know, the first contract was GPD. Oh, so the first contract was GPD for our architects. The second big contract is our construction manager at risk for the pre-construction services. So that's happening right now. We'll have another contract for our commissioning agent. They are the person that helps us put together our maintenance plans for when the buildings are complete to make sure that we maintain them over the long term. And to make sure all the building systems work the way they're supposed to. And then once we start construction, then, well, right before we start construction, the construction manager, based on the design work, will issue what's called the guaranteed maximum price. So we'll know how much it's going to cost to build each building. And then they'll submit pay applications as we work through the construction schedule. So they'll submit as they go, typically on a monthly basis. And, you know, so then, you know, the treasurer's office will be pulling those forward. Now, we're going to need to have the full amount available, even though we won't draw that money all right away. We have to have the full amount available when we start construction because the treasurer has to be able to certify that we have funds available.
Thank you, Ted. Any more questions? All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you again for coming out and speaking about that issue. So what's next? So we had our January Finance Committee meeting. We had the April one 2 days after April ended today. So our next meeting will be July. And again, I will take suggestions and questions that you guys have and prepare for that meeting based on that. So continue to send it and continue to get the feedback from the community members on what they want to hear.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Mrs. Armstrong. Could I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Motion to adjourn the meeting?
Second.
Mr. Akins?
Yes.
Mrs. Boynton?
Yes. Motion passes 2-0. And this meeting is adjourned. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order our Bedford Board of Education regular meeting. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Boynton,
Here.
Mrs. Macklin,
Here.
Mr. Akins,
Present.
Mrs. Turner Birch, Mrs. Carter.
Here. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? On our agenda is item number 2.01, acknowledgement of our goals. Please read them at your leisure. Item number 3 is awards presentation and communication. 3.01 is the identification dashboard and updates, and our Mr. Harrington will be coming before us now.
Board President Boynton, Superintendent Dr. Johnson, board members, as always, thank you for this opportunity to share information from our state Department of Education and Workforce, and then also provide information on our district and buildings and their performance. Mrs. Armstrong, you start the timer on me really soon. Yeah, can you please? Man. I know, I got it. I know, I need them all.
You're wasting time, Mr.
Okay, thank you. All right, so today what we wanted to do was share details on the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce new identification dashboard and also the webpage. Review Every Student Succeeds Act school identification for Ohio, the changes. Some of this will be review and then also the notification process. Explain new state student group accountability. Review data findings for state student group accountability areas, provide insight on the improvement process, highlight the successes of the buildings, and then identify next steps to promote and sustain improvement. So the Department of Education developed the identification dashboard to assist with the understanding of federal and state identification of schools and districts. If you remember before, we shared designations and our schools coming off. The areas of usage, statewide comparison of traditional schools and districts, and then also community schools, while displaying data that is detailed and related to the identification criteria, and then also cut scores or thresholds. The observable data is region by region, trend analysis, and then also exit status. And then upcoming, they're going to have information about special education in alignment with IDEA. The webpage was recently updated to provide that relevant and federal and state mandated identification. And then also the dashboard and webpage serve as the main resource to get the information for districts and schools. Again, this is a review. We wanted to share before why schools are identified, and the most important is federal law through ESSA. Also, it's part of the Ohio's Consolidated State ESSA plan in alignment with our pathway to improvement, and then our district 3-year plans and the building's 3-year plans also. Previously, I shared that letters were sent to superintendents about notification if there was a designation, and that was back on June 28, 2023. And again, we didn't have any schools identified. Again, a review. Previously, the identification or designations were priority, warning, and focus schools. Priority changed to comprehensive support and improvement, or CSI. Warning schools changed to additional targeted support and improvement, ATSI. And then focus schools changed to targeted support and improvement, TSI. And I know this is kind of small, but additionally, this comes straight from the new dashboard. I wanted to be able to provide this in case board members or anybody in the audience, if you ever went to the dashboard, you were able to see how each area had the entrance criteria and also the exit criteria for the CSI, ATSI, and TSI. So all 3 of these areas speak to those. Now, what is new is the state student group accountability. This is a state level identification aspect, which was formerly WATCH. through Ohio Revised Code 3317.40. It speaks to what we always talk about, how are we using our federal funds appropriately to service our kids through our schools. But for this one, they're looking at 4 specific groups. So our English learners, our students with disabilities, economically disadvantaged students, and gifted students. And the goal is to make sure that if there are gaps, we're closing those gaps and making sure they're on the right trajectory for graduation. So when we go to the dashboard, you'll see the student group identification overview. The 4 orange circles really speak to those 4 areas that I just talked about. And the blue is good because it represents satisfactory for our district. So I wanted to start with that so everybody can see as a district, we've hit all of those and we're performing in a satisfactory way. Just to give a visual, as you go through the dashboard, you can also go through each specific area. So this one speaks to economic disadvantage, and it's for the district perspective. So just looking back at those blue circles, this is just teasing it out in written form, I guess you could say. It also shares the ELA Performance Index, which you see in yellow, and then also the Math Performance Index. And then beside that, you can see the threshold, if this was a little larger, you can see the threshold for the state and where we are in comparison. We are not there, but we're moving in the right trajectory again. This would be the same thing for our English learner, students with disability. And then for this page, what I wanted to do is show the breakdown in those 4 categories by our buildings or for our buildings. I wanted to provide this visual because it shows all 4. So if I looked at the top, Bedford High School, you see economically disadvantaged, gifted, ELL, and then students with disability. They have 3 satisfactory, and then they're not counted for the ELL because they don't have a subgroup in that respective area. And then you see so on for Carrollwood, Central, Columbus, Glendale, and Heskett. I do want to speak to Excel because Excel for the economic disadvantage, they didn't meet the threshold. So one of the requirements would be for them to do an improvement plan. But the one thing I want to speak about with Excel, before people start to criticize, we have to remember why Excel was created. Excel was created to make sure that we had a place for our students who were struggling or who had additional needs. So we understand that they're going in already at risk. So we understand that improvement plan is something that we would be planning for anyway. Also, because we've been ahead of the game and maybe some other districts, as we work on our 1 plan, our 1 needs assessment, and our 3-year plans, that improvement plan work just feeds into that. So it's not additional work. So I just wanted to capture that. To make sure I meet my 10-minute quota, I'm not going to go through each one of these, but just like the district, each building has their own specific area or identification detail. So I kind of showed it the same way where you can see as we move along economic disadvantage, how the buildings performed. And then also again in yellow, you see their ELA performance and their math performance. And then what is that in comparison to that state threshold or cut score? English learner for Columbus, students with disability. Now, as we get into the improvement, again, as I shared previously, the first step is the notification. From there, the improvement planning requirements, the access to the support from the state level, and then that district and school improvement work or that plan. Again, a visual for the action steps, the identification, address the reason for that identification, and then as we do our plans, making sure we're including evidence-based strategies, and again, allocating our resources to fund those plans. So we want to make sure that we're revising our 1 plans in our partnerships with our stakeholders, targeting the reason for identification, a big focus that we continue to talk about, and Mrs. Martin had presented on previously, our literacy achievement in our plans, what we're doing as it relates to Ohio Read, and then just making sure, again, the Every Student Succeeds Act and making sure we have evidence-based strategies. In closing, I'm going to talk about some commendations. You've seen this before, but again, Central, the 2.5 star rating on the report card, the high school, Columbus and Heskett with the 3.5 star rating, and then all of them coming off of that identification list. So we should clap for that. The high High School also have a 4-star rating in progress. Columbus, a 5-star rating in progress.
No.
Central, a 4-star rating in gap closing. Heskett, a 4-star rating in progress also. And then Carrollwood, 2.5-star overall rating. And Glendale, a 3-star overall rating and a 4-star rating in gap closing. So, again, celebrating the work at the building level that is being done by the leaders and the teachers working with our students and all of the staff, really understanding what it takes to address the needs of the whole child. Again, what we're always trying to do is make sure we're looking at what's working across subjects and grade levels. What are our students doing to meet that proficient or being higher? What are we doing for our students that are struggling? And then one of the things that the buildings have really talked about in looking at data is how do we move our students from limited and basic to proficient and accomplished? And then also, are we missing students when we're having our tests? So when we talk to the principals, what is your plan? How are you making sure that you're communicating with parents? How are you incentivizing the testing? How are you making sure the environment is conducive to learning and then also success? And what's up next? Really, as we continue to identify curriculum that works, we want to make sure that we had our math adoption. We're finishing up our ELA adoption. So we're reviewing Ohio Materials Matter. Again, the literacy plan, the 3rd grade reading guarantee. What is that communication to parents? Making sure they understand the importance of that. How are we making sure that we're preparing students at the younger grades because they are the foundation, as I said before, as they move up to the bridge, which I would consider middle school, and then as they move on into that journey of life, which is after high school. And then also looking at how do we engage our parents to make sure our students are here and present so we can give them the education that they need. And then how are we providing meaningful and relevant professional development opportunities to our teachers, our counselors, to our administrators. And that's all that I have. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Harrington.
No problem.
It is always good to hear all the great things that are happening in the Bedford City School District. And I would just like to say personally, thank you for great leadership here, great administration, our wonderful teachers, and we'll be able to thank them more for Teachers Appreciation Week, and I think it's next week. And thanks to all of you. We have done such a great job in our district, and people need to hear it. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I want to say great job. I love seeing all of the good news and things like that. You probably can't answer this right now, but what do you think is contributing to the improvement of what's going on? Is it just the collaboration? What do you think the key things are?
I think it's a multitude of things. I think it's the collaboration. I think it's the communication. I think it's the intentionality from the building level. I think it's the planning from the building leadership, and then I think the opportunities that are now presented with some of the things that we're bringing back. I think we have teachers who are open to doing things and moving away from things that have been done in a traditional setting if it wasn't working. I think you always want to sustain things that work, but I think it's just a intentionality and being specific to understanding what the needs are for our relative students.
And I'm glad to hear that you said that they're open and willing to do what's new to help them and not sticking with what used to be done and may not work today. So I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Harrington. We gave you a few more minutes. Next on the agenda is item number 3.02, and we are receiving, Mr. Harrington, just come on back up here.
I'm doing this too.
There will be a presentation for the Momentum Award.
Okay. I didn't know I was doing the Momentum Award. Oh, is it?
That's your name.
All right. So we wanted to recognize one of our buildings for the work that they've been doing all year, actually for the past 2 years, probably prior to that. But when we talk about the Momentum Award, I'm just going to read what it says. The Momentum Award is for districts and buildings that have demonstrated outstanding improvement and achievement while also continuing to show growth. The Momentum Award is for districts and buildings that have improved their performance index by 3 or more points from 2021-2022 report card to the 2022-23 report card and received a value-added progress rating of a 4 or more stars. So, with that, we wanted to recognize Bedford High School for everything that they're doing in receiving the Momentum Award. So I know we have a lot of the high school staff here. If they could stand up, please.
Yeah, she could come on up and say a few words.
So Mrs. Lewis is going to speak for a second.
Yeah, Ms. Lewis.
Come on, squad, come with me? Yeah. Let's go. So I will keep it short and sweet. I know there's a lot on the agenda. Honestly, Dr. Johnson calls me and says, you got the Momentum Award? I'm like, well, what's that? So she begins to tell me what it is, and I begin to get emotional and teary because the job is hard. And we show up every day. We show up and we show out no matter what is going on, no matter who the doubters are, and we continue to do what we know that we can do. I wore this shirt on purpose because this is our thing. All our teachers have it. So everything we do, this is a statement, is because kids. And so I wanted all my teachers to come here today because it's not a me thing, which is what I keep trying to tell them. It's a we thing. And so we continue to move. We continue to believe in our kids. We continue to do all the things outside of traditional education day in and day out. I text Officer Hudson because he's a part of this too. It's an entire community. It's an entire staff. Our security guards are talking to kids daily about making good decisions. They're giving motivational speeches before they take the state test. This is a community that we've not had yet. And I'm excited to lead it. I'm excited to just be a part of it and watch it. Again, this is a community. I'm homegrown, so to come back and just see all the things that we are doing and shifting, I appreciate the superintendent, the board, the exec team, because they believe in us. And they allow us to make certain decisions for our buildings. They believe in our vision, and we see it through every day, and it's hard. And I thank all of you up here for what you do every day. We put these kids, a lot of time, are our kids here before your own kids at home, because I do it regularly, and I know you do too. So we have two families, our family at home and this family here, and I am blessed to be a part of it, and I love all of you, and thank you.
Wow. You're gonna make me teary-eyed.
We definitely say thank you because it shows. We can see that, you love the kids. Everybody does, because you do put them first. The numbers are showing, and I'm hoping that our communities can see this and continue to help us grow along with you, because we are here for you.
I think it's fantastic, even more so as you go back and say, you are homegrown. When you first got the position, you're like, I'm here, I'm home. And to have someone from home leading in such a direction from what we knew to where we are, you are a part of that shift. So the pendulum is swinging, and since it's swinging your way, and it's amazing and fantastic just to see and witness friend and colleague doing well and pushing us in the right direction we're supposed to be going in.
Thank you.
I wanna say Kalisha.
No stories. She going to the story.
Okay, I won't tell no stories, but I am so, so, so proud of you. I remember though when you were in high school. I remember going to track and basketball games as security. But you have done such a wonderful job, and I think you're a wonderful person. I know your mom is smiling. I know your dad is looking down on you, smiling and praising you.
Yes.
I'm just so, so proud of you, and I want you to continue doing what you're doing. Don't ever give up on anything you believe in or anything you want to do, because life will keep you moving. And as far as the students, I know you love them. I know you do, and you just have to keep going. So I'm sorry I made you teary-eyed. But I just have to say, well, yeah, you know he's smiling down on you. You know I know him well, and he's smiling down on you. He's so proud of you. So just continue doing what you're doing, sweetheart, and you will go a long, long way in life. Love you, baby.
I just want to acknowledge you, and I just love the fact that you acknowledge the rest of the staff and what they did as well, because it's definitely a team effort. And one thing that I noticed is that this is all happening at the high school. So all of our school district, all of our children, they know that this is what's to be expected as they get up to this point. And I'm glad that you're leading the charge. I know it's not a usual 9-to-5 job being in education, so I appreciate all that all of the staff does. And just thank you for doing what you do. Just continue to engage our students, encourage them. Sometimes they may not get that encouragement at home, so if they can get it at school, then that's a bonus. So just keep doing what you do, and I'm proud of you all.
Thank you all for just loving our children.
Well, boss, at least you know how I feel about her and her team. I think each of them I had to call upon to walk into a very difficult situation. And so I just want to personally thank you and tell you that you know I got you. I got you.
Understood, thank you.
Sometimes it's all about timing. And you are exactly what this community needs right now. And that's tough, because when you're trying to do right, a lot of things gonna come at you, try to get you to do wrong. But I got you. 2 weekends ago, I'm in Pittsburgh, just taking a break from basketball with my son and my husband. I just so happened to be in a restaurant, no idea who this person is sitting next to me. I overhear them talking about their child and how their child just want to go back to their home school. I want to go back to my home school. So I lean over and I say, well, where do you live? Where's your home school? They tell me Bedford. Things are happening and changing at Bedford High School. All my baby talk about is I want to go back and be a Bearcat. That's because of your leadership, your ability to change mindsets, and therefore get people to do what they need to do because they want to do it. And that's what we need. That's how we sustain success. So I personally thank you from the bottom of my heart, because I know it's tough. I know it's tough being a female. I know it's tough being a black female leadership. I know it's tough being a mom, everything. And you gotta show up every day regardless as to what you're going through. And that takes a lot. So we appreciate you, and I thank the board for their support. When I talked about change, you were there and you supported that change. and I think we're reaping the benefits of it, so thank you.
Everybody's trying to think.
Next on the agenda is audience participation. Mrs. Armstrong.
You want me to read the?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
The audience participation is for those wishing to make public comment and/or comments regarding the resolutions on which the board will take action during this meeting. Participants will be recognized by the presiding officer and must preface their comments by an announcement of their name, address, and group affiliation, if and when appropriate. Each statement made by a participant shall be limited to 3-minute duration.
Thank you, Mrs. Carter.
So we just have one card, Mrs. Cardamone.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Debbie Cardamone, I'm from Walton Hills, and I have one question, I have many, but one question that has been gnawing at me is, with the passing of the bond, and you're gonna move forward with the new buildings, but you have no renderings, you have no idea what this is gonna cost. The architects have already been chosen. What is the process that they were chosen? Is there a competitive, do you have to go out for bids for this? I would like to think you do, to keep it honest. I know it's gonna cost a lot of money to have the renderings created. I understand also that right before COVID hit, there were renderings created. Can't those be used to help save money, to make sure that there is enough funding to complete your project?
Yes, and in fact, your question has been addressed before at previous meetings.
Okay,
But,
sorry, I didn't.
That's okay. Mr. Ellsworth will come now to answer those questions.
Okay.
Thank you. So the process for selecting an architect is under a Ohio Facilities Construction Commission project, which this project is prescribed by the Ohio Revised Code. It does require what's called an RFQ process. So you issue a request for qualifications out to professional design services. So we advertise in a newspaper, we advertise in trade publications, and we also send out that RFQ to any architectural firms we know about. So, you know, a blanket mailing went out to multiple architectural firms. So we give them a deadline to submit a written statement of qualifications. The architects then submitted those requests, those qualifications, and we had a selection committee made up of the superintendent, myself, members of the executive leadership team, and other personnel to look at those qualifications and narrow the list down, because you know a number of firms submitted. We narrowed that down to 3 firms. Then we interviewed all 3 of those firms, and we used the selection criteria that's established by the Ohio Revised Code to score each individual firm as they by their presentation. And so that is how for this iteration of the master planning process, the architect was chosen. You mentioned that there were previous renderings. All that was done before was ideas. There were no blueprints, there were no drawings, and those ideas were incorporated into the new process. We included those with the new group in the master planning process. So those became a part of what we were doing as we were trying to decide how to build this project out. As for budget, you mentioned that we don't have any idea how much this costs. We actually have an idea of exactly how much this will cost. We will design the schools to the budget, not the other way around. We won't design the school first and then whatever the budget is what the budget is. We actually set the budget first. The budget is set by the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission guidelines. They have for different market areas, because it costs more to build here than it does in Canton, for example. You know, they have a price per square foot, and they base the square footage based on an enrollment projection. So they hire an outside firm to do an enrollment projection, and then they tell you what your budget is. And so this is what you can build, and that's what went to the taxpayers, was that budget that was set by the commission based on their enrollment projection for the school district. So we will actually, at every step of the design process, we will take a break. There's different phases of design, and we will, and our construction manager will actually go through, and they're the people that will actually build the building. They will go through the designs at the step that we're at and do their price estimating. And so if we are not on target, if we're going to be over, then we will do what's called value engineering. And that's where you go through and you say, okay, what can we live without, what can we most have? And so by the end of the day, by the time we actually start construction, we will have a very good idea of what the budget, we'll have a very set budget. It's already set right now. And of course, there's always things you don't know about, so you do build contingencies in. But budget control is the number one thing that me and the treasurer will be doing as we go through the process. So.
Can I ask one thing? Can you also indicate what a contingency is? Some people may know
Oh,
what that
I'm
is,
sorry.
others may not.
So during construction, things may come up that you didn't know about. So for example, when you're doing the foundations, you may come across something that was buried underground that you didn't know about. And so that may add some cost. So you build contingency funds in. So you may set a 5% of the budget contingency. Now whatever that doesn't, if that doesn't get spent, that goes back at the end of the day back into the bond retirement fund, which ultimately, back when the bonds are retired, will reduce the overall taxes that are levied against the community.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Gillespie.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is item number 5.01. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes for April 18, 2024, please?
So moved.
It's been moved by Mrs. Turner Birch and second by Mrs. Macklin. No questions, roll call please.
Mrs. Turner Birch,
Yes.
Mrs. Macklin,
Yes.
Mrs. Boynton,
Yes.
Mr. Akins,
Yes.
Mrs. Carter.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, board. Next on the agenda is our consent agenda. 6.01. Can I have a motion, please, to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
It's been moved by Mrs. Carter and second by Mr. Akins. Do we have any questions, board, about the consent agenda? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Carter,
Yes.
Mr. Akins,
Yes.
Mrs. Boynton,
Yes.
Mrs. Macklin,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner Birch.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, board. Next on the agenda is our superintendent's report. Dr. Johnson.
Good evening, Board President, Vice President, Board members. Before I go into the superintendent's report, the last board meeting you did approve the hiring of some of our CTE teachers. Because that was a work session, we asked them to come to this meeting so that you could meet them and they could maybe tell a little bit about themselves. So we have them here tonight. The first individual, though he was not on the agenda because he's a current teacher, he is transitioning to a new role. And some of you may not know who he is and what he's done. So Mr. Kanan Gabriel, we have Tremia Hill, Mr. Smith, Barry Smith. I'm not sure, I think the culinary teacher will be coming at a later date, Sandra Stewart. And then we have Caitlin Leitner, the sports and exercise medicine teacher. So is it okay if each of them stands so you know who they are and they can kind of tell you their names and a little bit about themselves?
Well, I'm Caitlin. Nice to meet all of you guys. I'm local. I'm from Hudson, Ohio. I went to Mercyhurst up in Erie, PA for my bachelor's in athletic training. And now I work at Malone in Canton as an athletic trainer, and I'm finishing up my master's from East Stroudsburg.
Gabriel, finishing my 18th year in the district, teaching art at Central. And I will be teaching film and media production at the high school next year. I've been doing film probably for the last 12 years and have my own media company, and it's like a passion. And I can't stop smiling every time I talk about it. I'm geeked in that whole display. I'm like, oh, you're doing it, us. So I'm just glad to have this opportunity, and I'm really looking forward to it. So,
Thank you. Caitlin, what is Caitlin?
She is our sports and exercise medicine teacher.
Thank you.
I didn't know if Mr. Smith?
Hi, I'm Barry Smith. When I left out here in 1985, I never expected to do a full circle back. Left here, National Guard, went to Central State University, began working as a police officer with the Oakwood Village. Now I work for the city of Stowe, expected to retire in July of this year, and I'm so proud and honored to be back in this program.
That's it.
Criminal justice teacher. And Shadia?
Hi, I'm Sharia Hill, cosmetology instructor, salon owner of 21 years, cosmetologist of 31 years. I'm eager to start this next year's school year. I'm really excited about this and thankful for the opportunity.
Thank you. Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Welcome to all of you.
Under the superintendent's report, I have 10 items that I'm recommending. Under 7.01, you'll find the following resolution. Under 7.02, you'll find the following resolution of the non-renewal of the substitute teachers and Title I tutors. Just for some clarification purposes, under law, we do have to do this each year. For these contracts, for the substitute teachers. We hope, as well as our substitute and our tutors, that they come back to be a part of the Bearcat family, but we do have to do this prior to being able to even offer that opportunity. Under 7.03, we have the following resolution. Under 7.04, we have the following non-renewal. Under 7.05, you see the termination. Under 7.06, the following administrative contracts. Under 7.07, the non-administrative contracts. Under 7.08, we have a senior rule that we're recommending to you. Under 7.09, we have the construction contract for the COS program on behalf of Mr. Ellsworth. And under 7.10, we have the following service contract for the Executive Director of School and Community Relations. When we get to 9, I was asked if you and Dr. Threek were going to come up and talk about that. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Johnson. Board, could I have a motion to approve 7.01?
Motion to approve resolution as presented.
Second. It's been moved by Mrs. Carter and second by Mrs. Macklin. Board, do we have any questions or discussion regarding this resolution? Hearing none, roll call please, Mrs. Armstrong.
Mrs. Carter?
Yes.
Mrs. Macklin?
Yes.
Mrs. Boynton?
Yes.
Mr. Akins?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner Birch?
Abstain.
Motion passes 4-1. Abstain. 7.02, please, could I have a motion?
Motion to approve the resolution as presented.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Akins and second by Mrs. Carter. Roll call, please.
Mr. Akins?
Yes.
Mrs. Carter?
Yes.
Mrs. Boynton?
Yes.
Mrs. Macklin?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner Birch?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Board. And could I have a motion for 7.03?
Motion to approve resolution as presented.
Second.
It's been moved by Mrs. Carter and second by Mr. Aiken. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Carter?
Yes.
Mr. Akins?
Yes.
Mrs. Boynton?
Yes.
Mrs. Macklin?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner Birch?
Abstain. Motion passes 4-1. Could I have a motion for 7.04?
Motion to approve.
Second.
It's been moved by Mrs. Macklin and second by Mrs. Carter. Any questions, I'm sorry, in discussion board? Hearing none, roll call please, Mrs. Armstrong.
Mrs. Macklin?
Yes.
Mrs. Carter?
Yes.
Mrs. Boynton?
Yes.
Mr. Akins?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner Birch?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. 7.05, could I have a motion please, board?
Motion to approve.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Akins and second by Mrs. Macklin. A roll call please.
Mr. Akins?
Yes.
Mrs. Macklin?
Yes.
Mrs. Boynton?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner Birch?
Yes.
Mrs. Carter?
Yes.
Motion passed 5-0. Thank you, board. Could I have a motion for item number 7.06?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Mrs. Turner Birch and second by Mr. Akins. Do we have any questions or discussion, board? Hearing none, roll call please.
Mrs. Turner Birch?
Yes.
Mr. Akins?
Yes.
Mrs. Boynton?
Yes.
Mrs. Macklin?
Yes.
Mrs. Carter?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, board. And 7.07, please. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
It's been moved by Mrs. Macklin and second by Mrs. Carter. Do we have any questions, board? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Macklin?
Yes.
Mrs. Carter?
Yes.
Mrs. Boynton?
Yes.
Mr. Akins?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner Birch?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. And could I have a motion for 7.08, please?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Mrs. Turner Birch and second by Mrs. Macklin. Questions or concerns? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Turner Birch?
Yes.
Mrs. Macklin?
Yes.
Mrs. Boynton?
Yes.
Mr. Akins?
Yes.
Mrs. Carter?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. 7.09, we're going to hear before, first. Yeah, okay.
You want me to go first?
Yes, would you please? Yes.
All right. Thank you. So I did prepare a very short presentation. So as you know, we're bringing back the cosmetology program. It is the most popular program among our students. And you know, we used to have cosmetology here, but we joined a consortium, and basically what happened is the district dismantled its cosmetology room at that time. So we no longer have any of that equipment. You know, the space was completely gutted. Because our program will technically be considered a new program, we actually have to meet the new state standards. Under the old room was grandfathered in; it had been there before the new standards were put in place. So we, Dr. Threet and I, along with our architects GPD group, we met with the State Board of Cosmetology and Barber, and we found out all of the new standards that are in place for a room. So we asked GPD then to design a room for those standards. So the project location, after examining all the available spaces at the high school, was determined that renovating the previous cosmetology space was still the most cost-effective solution. And given that some of the necessary infrastructure was still there, such as behind the walls and under the floors. Because it's located at the high school, and Dr. Threet can speak more to this, the state board requirements are less stringent than they would be if we tried to go outside to another location. So having it at the high school is still the most cost-effective solution that we have available to us. The largest single expense as we got through design of the cosmetology laboratory is the ventilation system, a feature that did not exist in the previous grandfathered room. Because of the plumbing, electrical, and HVAC work that's necessary to create the appropriate ventilation of the space, as you know, they use a lot of chemicals and things, so they have to bring in a lot of outside air. We were able to add air conditioning to the space at nominal additional cost, almost nothing additional, because of the system that was going to have to be in place anyway to ventilate. So that was a big positive. Other expenses, including adding a door between the lab and the adjoining classroom, which is due to the fact that now there's a 3,000 square foot minimum requirement. In order to meet that 3,000 square foot, we have to include the next classroom over. So we are adding a door in between those two classrooms. We're also doing some very minor aesthetic improvements, such as paint. We'll be having improved lighting for the work that they're going to be doing in that space. And we'll be covering some existing asbestos flooring. The flooring cost is less than $4,000, it's like $3,700, but it makes sense to have some new flooring in the space. And we will be purchasing, of course, all of the equipment that's necessary to have a cosmetology room, such as sinks, hair dryers, styling stations, and other miscellaneous requirements. So the funding of the project, this is where it gets sticky. The cost of the renovation project is estimated at a guaranteed maximum price of $475,000. We are including then, on top of that, a $25,000 contingency fund. This is, fortunately, after the work of GPD and Panzica, our construction manager, we were able, that is an 18% reduction where the initial quote came in at, which was approaching $600,000. These funds will come exclusively from the Permanent Improvement Fund, which can only be used for capital improvements and purchasing of equipment. It can't be used for salaries or anything else, and there will be no general funds used on this project. Panzica Construction, as I mentioned, and their subs, they've already bid this project out, so they do have exact pricing. We'll be performing the work as we were able to, because they were the successful firm in our construction management at risk process, which included an RFQ and interviews in accordance with the Ohio Revised Code. They will run this project for us, so it'll be a nice preview of the work that they'll do for us on the new schools. Future considerations, we will reuse as much of the equipment we are purchasing for this as possible, as we, both in the new high school and other facilities around the district. For example, I already have a plan for the air conditioning unit of where it will go. Of course, you're going to have the styling stations, sinks, hair dryers, and things that can be relocated as long as we take good care of them in the new cosmetology laboratory at the new high school. We'll be able to do that right at the end of construction, in between the time school closes and the new high school opens in the fall of 2028. As I said, the cosmetology program is currently the most popular CTE program offering based upon our student surveys. It is also, unfortunately, one of the most capital-intensive programs and has very stringent requirements set by the state licensing board. But this project will meet those requirements and will serve many students each of the next 4 school years, which I think is the most important point of all. And Dr. Threet, I don't know if you have anything to add.
You hit everything, but I will say that we've gotten questions about having our cosmetology school somewhere else outside of Bedford City Schools. And one of the responses that I have always said was there are 2 requirements when it comes to the State Board of Cosmetology. There are requirements, certain requirements for it being in a school setting as a career technical education program, and then there are also more stringent requirements if we went out on our own and found a building to house our cosmetology program. The reason for that is if we go out and find a building on our own to house that cosmetology program, it will be a separate entity, and it's considered a cosmetology school, an outside school. So there are so many more requirements that we would have to do that will be more cost for us.
than it is to have it in a high school or a vocational school setting, what we used to call it a long time ago, but in a career technical education setting within a high school. So that's why we have not researched having the cosmetology school as a standalone location. I think you've covered everything else, Mr. Ellsworth.
Any questions for me?
I do have one question, about how many students are we looking at, now?
So currently, we have about 25 students in our cosmetology that are coming in as juniors. So 25 10th graders who have signed up to be as in our cosmetology as juniors. And then we currently have, do you remember the number, Carla? Carla Robinson is our CTE coordinator for our current seniors.
Right, we have about 6 current seniors that will be coming to us since we are no longer part of the consortium. So there is a Maple Cos and there's a Cleveland Heights Cos, and so we're combining those students with us and bringing them back to us as seniors.
6. So we have 25 juniors and 6 seniors. We have 3 that's at Maple and 3 that's at Cleveland Heights that will come back and be a part of their senior year cosmetology.
So then next year there would be potentially like 50.
Yes.
I was gonna say, is
50 a year.
25 gonna be the
Yes.
standard?
Oh, yes. For the capacity of the classroom, to really efficiently teach the kids is about that much.
Yeah,
That's like,
yeah, the state's like 25, and that's perfect. You need more than that.
Any other questions?
So just so that I'm clear, structurally, the only thing that's being done to the structure of the building is a door.
No, the ventilation system, there's actually quite a lot going on structurally. You'll see new ventilation systems. There'll be new soffits that'll bring air from one of the outside windows in through the new air conditioning system and exhaust out. There'll also be a separate ventilation system for the manicure station, which is required by the code. And there'll be new lights and new.
I'm not
things like that.
considering that structure, I'm just saying what is gonna touch the bones of the building.
Oh,
And the reason why
There'll
I'm
be
asking.
some electrical work, certainly.
Okay, the reason why I'm asking is because we're doing this and spending this money so that we have transparency with the community to say, okay, is this part getting torn down?
Right.
We're putting this money, you know what I'm saying? So I just wanted
Right,
to be clear.
even some of the electrical, so there will be a new electrical panel because the new equipment has higher requirements than what we currently can hold in our capacity. I mean, the electrical system in that building is, was built in the 1960s, I think, or 50s. But, so there will be a new electrical panel. There will be, as I said, some new mechanical systems, which are, like the fans and things that bring the air in, the HVAC unit. There'll be plumbing as well. There has to be some new plumbing for the sinks and things like that. But, like I said, we're going to reuse everything we can. Fortunately, because we're using Panzica and GPD, we have a very tight inventory of everything we have. We know exactly what we have in there, and so we'll be able to plan for reusing that. Like even the electrical panel, we'll be able to reuse somewhere else. So we'll pull all that stuff out before the high school ends up being demolished.
And the capital improvement fund is what?
The permanent improvement fund. That's,
Permanent.
yeah, permanent improvement fund is the existing tax levy that is solely for use on capital improvements or large equipment purchases. It is brings in roughly $500,000 a year. About half of that is eaten up in an existing note from a borrowing the district did back in 2018. But
2018?
2018, yes, that's correct. But the rest of it is available for use, and we do have enough in the fund right now to fund this project. We will, the only reason, well, I don't want to take too much credit, but we knew when I came in that we weren't going to be utilizing these schools for the long term. The hope was anyway that's what. So we did save some money over the last couple of years for a project like this that potentially could be coming down the road. We didn't know exactly that this would be the project, but I knew there would be projects that needed to help us bridge the gap between the existing schools and the new schools.
One more question. You probably already mentioned it, but where in the high school is for this week?
So I always forget the exact classroom number. It is on the,
It's going
Towards the gym.
Okay.
so, I don't know if you're familiar where the current Family and Consumer Science room is. It's right across the hall from that. It's, C1 something. It's on the first floor.
South Center.
South Center.
Downstairs, South Center.
There we go.
Okay. Got it.
Yep.
It's South Center.
Yep.
South Center.
All right.
Yes.
Any other questions?
Thank you so much. Could I have a motion for 7.09?
Second.
It's been moved by Mrs. Turner Birch and seconded by Mrs. Carter. We've had a discussion. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Turner Birch,
Yes.
Mrs. Carter,
Yes.
Mrs. Boynton,
Yes.
Mrs. Macklin,
Yes.
Mr. Akins.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Board. Could I have a motion, please, for 7.10?
Motion to approve service contract is presented.
Second.
It's been moved by Mrs. Carter and seconded by Mrs. Macklin. Do we have any questions, Board, discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Carter,
Yes.
Mrs. Macklin,
Yes.
Mrs. Boynton,
Yes.
Mr. Akins,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner Birch.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Board. Item number 8 on our agenda is the treasurer's report. Mrs. Armstrong.
Okay. Good evening, Board President Boynton, Vice President Macklin, and board members. Tonight I have, I believe, 6 items on the agenda for approval. The first item is a fiscal officer certificate that we spoke a little bit about during the finance committee, but this is for for me to be able to certify a note. Item 8.02 is a note resolution for the issuance and sales of notes. Item 8.03 is an increase in appropriations, and this is in regards to 3 items. We have the PI fund that Tad spoke about. From a cash perspective, we have the funds in there, but I need to increase what we had in budget to spend by $75,000. Athletic or 200 fund, we have collected a lot more additional funds throughout the year for fundraising, so we need to increase that line. And then the third one was the student wellness. So the student wellness, ODE as well as the county. We spoke about this fund, the 467, earlier in the year. We were notified that it was incorrectly treated in 20 and 21, so we need to correct that. So we are working with our auditors to determine the best way to correct this account in our accounting system, but from their perspective, they cannot approve my increase of appropriations, and so I have to put this back in to our budget. So they're saying that we do have the roughly $200,000 to spend in the wellness fund. There was a carryover, but instead it was treated as a transfer, and it should not have been. So this is a correction to that. And once I have guidance from the auditors, I will give you guys feedback on that. Item number 5 is, we have 3 donations. We have the donation of a beginner's violin and acoustic guitar at a value of about $200. We have the donation of various art supplies valued at about $350 for the jewelry art program, and then the donation of 2 tenor sax with an approximate value of $1,500 to be used by the district's music program. And then item 8.06 is our then and now purchase orders.
Could I have a motion to approve 8.01, please?
Motion to approve.
Second.
It's been moved by Mrs. Carter, second by Mr. Akins. Any questions, Board? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Carter,
Yes.
Mr. Akins,
Yes.
Mrs. Boynton,
Yes.
Mrs. Macklin,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner Birch.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, board. Could I have a motion for 8.02?
Motion to approve.
Second.
It's moved by Mrs. Macklin and second by Mrs. Carter. Any questions, board? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Macklin?
Yes.
Mrs. Carter?
Yes.
Mrs. Boynton?
Yes.
Mr. Akins?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner Birch?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, board. 8.03, can I have a motion, please?
Motion to approve an increase in appropriations as presented.
Second.
It's been moved by Mrs. Carter and second by Mrs. Macklin. Any discussion, questions? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Carter?
Yes.
Mrs. Macklin?
Yes.
Mrs. Boynton?
Yes.
Mr. Akins?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner Birch?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
I realized I skipped this one when I spoke, but this is the renewal of Alicia Rutledge, the payroll specialist. She came to us in April of last year, so this is renewing her contract 7/1 for a 2-year contract. I do want to say she's been a great addition to the treasurer's office. I want to give her praise. It's a lot to learn working in schools payroll, and she is taking it with strides and learning every day and continuing to grow in the role.
Good to hear. Wonderful. Can I have a motion to approve, please?
Motion to approve?
So moved. Oh, second.
It's been moved by Mr. Akins and second by Mrs. Turner Birch. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Akins?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner Birch?
Yes.
Mrs. Boynton?
Yes.
Mrs. Macklin?
Yes.
Mrs. Carter?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Can I have a motion to approve item number 8.05, to accept those donations?
Motion to approve. Or second?
Moved by Mrs. Macklin, second by Mr. Aiken. Any questions? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Macklin?
Yes.
Mr. Akins?
Yes.
Mrs. Boynton?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner Birch?
Yes.
Mrs. Carter?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. We would like to thank the individual for all those gifts and donations. 8.06, can I have a motion to approve, please, the purchase orders?
Motion to approve purchase orders.
Second.
It's been moved by Mrs. Carter and second by Mrs. Turner Birch. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Carter?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner Birch?
Yes.
Mrs. Boynton?
Yes.
Mrs. Macklin?
Yes.
Mr. Akins?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, board. Thank you, board. It's a lot in the agenda tonight. Item number 9 is old business and new business. It's presented by the board. Do we have any business that we'd like to discuss at this time, board?
I just want to say thank you to everybody that came out and volunteered for the Special Olympics. It was such a great day, such a great event. Everybody had so much fun. It was just, like, it just warmed my heart to see so many people there participating. They were excited. I'm so grateful that we were able to host it this year. And I probably could speak on behalf of Ms. Topolsky. She was very, very happy for all the help that everybody came out and provided, so thank you.
I would like to thank everyone who came out to the night of the races for the foundation. It was really nice. It was a lot of fun, even though I lost my mind. But I just want to say thank you to everyone that came out and hope to see you at the Holly Ball. I just have my awarenesses for the month. It is Mental Health Awareness Month, so it's very important that we hone in on understanding each other's well-being, taking care of yourself as well. Sun is finally out, we're finally getting heat, so getting these opportunities to do some breath work outside, ground yourself, take some walks would be great. It's also Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So definitely want to give acknowledgement to our community members who are celebrating this month. We're celebrating, it's a couple weeks too. Teacher Appreciation Week is next week, as well as Hospital Week is next week. So just a great space to celebrate all of our frontliners. Educators are frontliners, and so are our hospital workers. So just celebrating and acknowledging each and every one of you. I know I'm missing some more, but I don't have my computer today. But just want to make sure that we're celebrating where we should.
also want to know that yesterday was Principals Appreciation Day. So I just want to say we appreciate all the principals in the Bedford City School District. They go above and beyond every day, and we appreciate their efforts.
Oh, lastly, Juneteenth. We are planning, strategic planning is still going on for our Juneteenth celebration. This is our second year for the programming, which will be held June 19th at 4 p.m. from 4 to 8. There will be vendors, there will be food trucks, there will be, you name it, we got it. And on top of that, it's going to be a day of everything because we will have a kickoff with the inaugural Freedom 5K and 1 miler. So you can walk or run. It's not saying you have to run, but it is a run walk. And if you don't think 5K is 3.1 miles for anyone who does like, 5, I don't know what that is. 3.1. But if you can't do that, join the 1 miler. Anyone 12 and under will need an accompanied adult to participate in the race. Anyone 12 and up can participate in the race by themselves. The registration is live. It has been posted on the website as well as my own social media pages. So please get registered. It's a nominal cost. You get snacks at the end to help boost yourself back up after the energy you have expelled. There'll be an awesome finish line on the track. It's just going to be a great time running through and walking through the community of Bedford. So join us.
So much. You can tell Ms. Turnbush is really excited about the run. I love her. Oh yeah, she did leave.
Thank you, Ms. Boynton. Couple of things. I just wanted to, the first thing is acknowledge our career and technical students and teachers and the Rotary. There was an excellent banquet, and it's just nice to see so many students. I want to also thank Patricia Phillips, the administrative assistant. She does a beautiful job prepping, organizing, and working collaboratively with Ms. Carla Robinson, the coordinator, as well. In addition to that, last week, myself and the other districts in the LEL Athletic Conference had the first annual leadership conference, just to ensure that we are really striving to get our students, our scholars, to understand that athletics and leadership are more than on the court, in the field, bowling alley, and beyond. And also just trying to rebrand, I'll be honest, but the perceptions that people have about our urban athletic league. There are a lot of discussions about that, and us really trying to move and shake and head things in a completely different direction. You would have been so proud of your scholars. The questions that they asked were of depth, and they were so engaged, and it was really nice to see our students come together with the students from Maple, Lawrenceville, Garfield, East Cleveland, and just really come together and talk about what they feel needs to be changed in athletics for them so that they can grow as individuals and be future leaders. Your students developed the agenda. They came up with all the titles. They introduced the speakers. They did an amazing, amazing job. You would have been really, really proud. And so our goal in the LEL is to make sure that we have 2 to 3 of these a year. Corporate College did the hosting. They opened their arms as usual. Dr. Kitchens from Tri-C stepped in and organized all that for us to be able to go over there. They had a nice lunch, and it was just really well done. So I just want to thank our students. And then also, Mrs. Boynton reminded me, I'm sure Dr. Threet would also like for this announcement for our seniors, our WISE group, our seniors 65 and older. There will be a prom June 10th, Dr. Threet, and it's from 1 to 3.
June 8th.
Oh, I was told June 10th. June 8th, and it's from 1 to 3.
Yes.
1 to 3 in La Casa Bella.
Yes.
So please make sure you check on our website, or you can email Ms. Phillips, I believe, pphillips@bedfordschools.org. She is doing a great job. And what's the theme again?
Fantastic voyage.
The Fantastic Voyage. You should see the invitations. So hopefully you will have an opportunity to stop by and see it. She's mailing out these, the attendees get a boarding pass to get onto the cruise ship.
Yeah, it's
So
nice.
it's really cool.
nice.
It's very creative. But thank you for the reminder.
There was something else too. Facilities meetings on the 14th, the community, facilities, community
Yes,
facilities
that's
meeting,
May 14th
May 14th, the time.
is, it's Meet the Architect, from 5 to 6 at the high school,
From 5 to 6, high school where?
at the NLGI.
NLGI, May 14th, come on. If you have questions, will questions be answered?
Yes, it's Meet the Architects and Construction Manager.
Meeting the architects and construction manager, just so we can see here.
I would just like to say that, it will be Teachers Appreciation Week next week, and also Administrators Appreciation Week. And I know the Board of Education have a time when we appreciate, I just want to say to this board, and I want the community to know, that we're just not here supporting, of course, on the first and third Thursday of each month. This board works very, very hard. We are supporting as many as we can. We do, of course, hold full-time jobs. And so I just want you to know that this board works very, very hard in supporting as many as of the activities and programs that we can. It was a very, very busy week for the Board of Education because there was so many things that was happening within our school district. So I just want to take this time to say thank you, board, for all your hard work, because you are there and we are supporting. And I want to say one thing to Trish Duncan. I did not win anything, Trish.
Foundation did.
That's the important one.
Thank you for coming. We appreciate the support.
You're welcome.
I wanted to mention last thing, because you mentioned your leadership team, and one of your leaders, Trinity Potter, just set a record for the triple high jump. So give it up for Trinity Potter, who is being amazing in the classroom, as well as in every sport that she plays, but definitely out here on this track.
And she and Terrell
Yeah.
were actually on the committee to plan. Yep, JJ Hudson as well, and then who am I forgetting? Anna was also on there, yes, to help plan.
And I did want to quickly say that about 2 weeks ago, I was able to attend the Ohio Association School Board Officials Annual Conference. So it was about 3 days of some really in-depth, very informative professional developments for business officials and treasurers. Also some networking opportunity. I also, for my first time, even though I am not a huge fan of presenting, was on a panel called the Newest Treasurers Panel. We actually just got some of our feedback from the conference yesterday. And even though I was nervous, some of it said it was very helpful to new treasurers. They enjoy learning that all new treasurers all face their own struggles but work together to become better. There are several responses, but by getting that, even though I was very nervous and I literally talked about hats, it was well received. So just wanted to share out that I attended that conference a couple of weeks ago.
Excellent and accurate.
Oh, so much good stuff, so much good stuff. Is that it, board?
Can we say something for you, Ms. Sharon? Well, Ms. Sharon, I hope it's okay, board, because I know that you are there for everybody. But you will be out for a little bit, taking care of you. We're gonna hold you to that. But I would just like to thank you, just on behalf of our entire staff here. You surprised us, well, kind of, you haven't told us it was coming, we've been waiting for a month, like, when is it coming, when is it coming? With your amazing cooking, your peach cobbler. Even though I know that you were preparing to get yourself ready, once again, you took time out to show that you cared about us, and you didn't have to do that. So I just want to thank you. We're going to be praying for you for a quick recovery, full recovery, and just hoping that you listen to the doctors.
No, she hard-headed, she ain't gonna do it.
And you take some time for you, and we thank you.
Thank you. She will. Alrighty, Sunday Board? All right, no hearts and minds approved. Item number 10 is executive session 10.01. Can I have a motion to go into executive session, please?
Motion to move into executive session? Motion to consider the purchase, acquisition, lease, transfer, or sale of any real, personal, or other property interest to prepare for conducting or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment.
Second.
Nobody wants to go in?
It's been moved by Mrs. Carter and second by Mr. Aiken. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Carter?
Yes.
Mr. Akins?
Yes.
Mrs. Boynton?
Yes.
Mrs. Macklin?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner Birch?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. First of all, I would like to just thank everyone for coming out and being a part and hearing all of the great things that are happening within the Bedford City School District. Our next meeting is 2 weeks from today, so we look forward to seeing you then. We will be going into executive session to discuss the items that was presented, and we will not be voting on anything after we come out of executive session. So again, thank you, and we'll be going into executive session.